Hello and a very warm welcome back to the garden. Gardening is a relatively simple process. However, during the growing season, we can often come up against challenges that can hinder our progress or even worse, cause stress and overwhelm. And these could be things, for example, pest issues, not having enough time, or realizing that you're lacking a particular resource, for example, compost. So in this video, I'm going to show you the method that I use to turn challenges into opportunities that will benefit your garden for years to come. When I initially come across a challenge in the garden, it usually goes one of two ways. It's either an opportunity or it's a bit of a hassle. And I'll give you a prime example of a hassle and a challenge. And these beds are nearly 20 years old, and you can see that they are falling apart and need replacing this winter. And initially I just see this as a hassle, but I always challenge myself to see what opportunity can come, even if at first it's a lot of negative feelings. And whether a challenge is a hassle or an opportunity, I use the same method to create a plan and to bring clarity and purpose to overcoming that particular challenge. The method consists of three key parts, which are to recognise, research and then respond. So I've recognised that I need to solve the issue with these broken raised beds. Then I need to research, and this is where I will find a solution and potentially opportunities that can come from solving this solution. And the third is to simply respond. This method provides you with a great template to create a solid plan to overcome that challenge and make it feel a whole lot more achievable. The first step is simple, and that's to recognise that you face a challenge. And this usually happens when you hit a barrier or you become frustrated. And I can remember back in 2018 during the summer when we had that terrible drought, I faced a real barrier, which was running out of water and not having enough water for our seedlings. With running out of water, I needed to find a low-cost solution to make sure that the same thing wouldn't happen in future years and I'd have water for the seedlings. And when you are faced with a challenge that's a bit of a hassle or is kind of a negative one, like running out of water, it's really easy to try and solve it and approach it there and then. But this is where mistakes can happen that can be more costly, both in terms of time, money and effort later on down the line. So it's vital that you step back and give yourself a bit of time to research, to find a solution and to bring clarity to what needs to be done. So this will minimise potential mistakes and maximise the potential opportunity that comes from solving that challenge. The first thing you want to do is get yourself your notepad and just make a note of the challenge that you're facing. However, this isn't usually necessary because with me, if I have a gardening challenge, it's always there looming in the back of my mind. And then go make yourself a tea or coffee and find a nice space to sit down and get a blank bit of paper. And what you want to do is write the challenge in the middle of the bit of paper. So you have your challenge in the middle of the paper, and now you want to just do a bit of a brain dump and a bit of a brainstorm. So just ask all of the questions that you have related to the challenge. What kind of budget, if you need to buy anything, do you have for it? What are the questions that you have unanswered that you want to find out? And what potential opportunities and also drawbacks as a result? You can use this bit of paper to then influence the research that you do. You now want to use free resources to help you find a solution and to answer all of the questions that you have regarding solving the issue of the challenge or the potential opportunity and the best way going about. Now, things like books that you have, gardening books, are a great place to look at. Also the internet, that's a wonderful place. But if I was to recommend one resource, it would be other gardeners in your area. There is nothing more powerful than the knowledge of gardeners in the same climate as you who are probably or perhaps experiencing the same kind of challenges that you do. And it's great to just ask for their advice or their recommendations, or they may give you almost a different way of thinking or looking at that potential challenge. And you want to end up with at least 3 potential solutions, preferably a couple more, and then whittle them down to the one that makes the most sense to you. Let's look at the drought example. The first thing that I explored was the potential of getting some more big tanks like this. However, it's pretty difficult to carry big things like this down our driveway. So I looked at other solutions such as bladder packs, for example. And then I remember speaking to Liz and going and seeing her garden, and she had IBC tanks. And then I did a bit of research and I saw that these were a really affordable solution so long as there weren't any harmful chemicals in them before. And that's exactly what I did. I bought 6 IBC tanks for the fraction of the price of what the equivalent water tank would cost. And it's always a really good idea, if you do feel that you have the golden solution, to just sleep on it for a night and to come back the next day, because often you need to give your brain a little bit of time to process, and that will just draw out any final questions or worries you might have about that solution. Once you've agreed on that one main solution that you want to go for, it's time for the most important step of the whole process, and that is to put it down in a clear and concise manner to act as your blueprint as you respond to that challenge. So what you need to do is get yourself a blank piece of paper, and on this you're firstly going to write out what the challenge is, and then you're going to have 1 to 2 paragraphs detailing what the solution is that you've decided to overcome and solve the challenge or the potential problem. And then after you've done that, you're just going to write down what the outcome is. So just have a bit of a think about how you'll feel once the challenge is completed and what kind of benefits you'll get. And here's an example of what I did, of the blueprint that I wrote for the drought issue, and I was looking at overcoming that challenge. Challenge. Our water supplies could dry out again if we have another severe drought, and I don't have enough water storage to keep seedlings going for at least 2 months. The solution. I need to purchase 6 used IBC tanks for the equivalent water storage capacity of 6,000 litres of water, or 600 full watering cans. The tanks must only have contained safe material beforehand, and I will not take a risk in purchasing contaminated tanks. The tanks will be placed at the north end of the new garden and supported on top of heat-treated pallets to allow space to fit a watering can underneath, and I will need to buy a tap that will fit the thread size of the IBC tanks. The tanks will be filled from one inlet that carries water from the stream on the other side of the parking area. I will use a small pipe to attach each IBC tank. Once the first tank is full, the connection pipe will start filling the second, and so on. This needs to be completed by February to not interfere with spring sowings, and to be filled with water and ready for action as and when needed. And then the outcome. Once completed, I will have storage capacity of 6,000 litres of water ready for action in case of a drought, and I will feel far less stressed when dry weather does stay around longer than usual. So from this example, you can see that I've got all of the basics covered for what needs to be done, and the important thing is to keep it concise, so it's an easy reference point as you're doing the challenge or looking for products that you might need, to just quickly go back, have a quick glance at the page, and then you can carry on with the project. And you can add in a bit more detail if you want underneath, but the important thing is just have a bite-sized blueprint and plan. And finally, it's vital that you add a target date, because you don't want to kind of not have a target date and keep pushing it back, and suddenly you're left with a big build-up of challenges that all need to be solved around the same time. Once you've completed your plan, it's time to respond and put everything into action and complete what's needed to overcome that certain challenge. So I've got 5 IBC tanks here for 5,000 litres, and there's another IBC tank in the garden. Now, just a couple of tips. Firstly, if you're doing it and it involves a lot of materials and a lot of moving and perhaps heavier things, then it's always worth getting someone else involved. The extra pair of hands and someone to talk to as you're doing it makes it a lot more enjoyable. Now, if you're doing it by yourself, one of the simplest things you can do is to look at the big project and then create a very simple to-do list of lots of small, manageable, bite-sized tasks, and then you can just cross them out as you go along, and that'll be the motivation to push you forward in terms of completing it. Now, if you go into the video description and have a quick look, I've included 2 other blueprints that I've created for other gardening challenges. So you can use those as well as this video of recognise, research and then respond to help create a really solid template for whenever you come across challenges in the garden. And if you enjoyed this type of content, which is looking more towards being more efficient and productive and time management, then you'll really love my course, More Food, Less Effort. It's an online course designed around how to make you a more efficient gardener. So if you want to check it out, head to morefoodlesseffort.com. And in the meantime, I will see you again next week. Goodbye.